Hello, and welcome to The Anatomy of Attention, how to capture and commercialize 21st century gold. In this session, we're going to break down how the plays that some of the fastest growing brands for Gen Z audiences are running to capture and commercialize attention. I'm Sarah Wilson.
And I'm Michelle Goad.
And we're your hosts. So Michelle, why are we using attention as the way in here?
We think for brands today, attention is the modern day equivalent of gold. A thing that everybody wants that's hard to find, it's hard to keep, it's super valuable, and everybody's trying to steal it from you. And each play that we're going to run through today is a tool to mine for gold.
I seriously love that analogy. I think it's important to say that as a brand, you used to be able to just kind of pay for attention. It was something that you could shell out money for and it would come to you. You could throw a ton of money on Facebook ads and strike gold, so to speak. With the gold rush, those days are really over. That's no longer working. And I think as brands, we're all feeling that in different ways. So we need to find different ways to capture attention, to become what you and I refer to as attention machines. So who are we and why are we poised to have this conversation?
So hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Goad. I'm a serial entrepreneur, operator, and business builder in the retail and commerce space, former venture-backed CEO, and now founder of Greatest of All Digital, a social-first commerce agency helping clients like the Turning Group, Alo Yoga, Coca-Cola, expand their IP and grow their business. And my superpower is always about growth and commerce expansion.
And my name is Sarah Wilson. I'm a journalist turned social marketer. I work with brands and publications and platforms like Nike and YouTube, helping them build obsessive communities across digital channels through my consultancy SW projects. And I would say my superpowers are social first marketing, community building for brands, and understanding how audiences show up online in service of both. So we got together to create the Brand Yearbook. Michelle, do you want to explain what the heck the Brand Yearbook is?
Oh my gosh, yes. My favorite project of the year. So Sarah and I met back when she was a content strategist for my org, when I was a GM at Nike. And we stayed in touch and decided to keep our love and obsession with serving Gen Z alive. We're now on our second year of co-authoring the Brand Yearbook, which is really the product of countless hours of talking to our Gen Z brain trust. Then we diligence brand growth, traffic growth, social growth, and of course, combine that with the almighty quarterly and annual earnings reports and private company disclosures on business performance, which we take and we summarize and package in an extremely fun and we think entertaining, enjoyable format of a yearbook that thousands of you sit down and read. What this is not is a best of list. And instead, it's really looking at brands that most connected with Gen Z or have the potential to do so across two fronts. The first is their strength in brand marketing, and specifically their ability to generate attention and expand into new touch points with new audiences. And the second is the strength of their business. How fast are they growing in digital traffic, revenue? What's their stock price doing? And market cap if they're public. We recently published our last year 2023 report, and it features 16 brands and their playbooks. And really, we'd love, if you haven't already, for you to go download it, read it, enjoy it at www.thebrandyearbook.com. While these brands all cover super different industries and verticals, there is one common denominator across all of them. Every brand that we write about in this book knows how to both capture and commercialize the most valuable commodity in the world, which is attention.
Okay, wait, I love this, but is it really the most valuable commodity in the world?
Okay. Fair. In our day to day, yes, but no, obviously.
I feel like that's water. If you had to name the most valuable,
water,
right? But it is the most valuable commodity, maybe in business today.
That's right. I agreed. Okay, fair.
All right, cool, got it. Just wanted to clarify for we do live in the real world as well now. So yes. All right, what are we going to do today? Well, today we're going to give you that playbook on a silver platter. So we're going to break down the moves that every single brand, regardless of size or budget or level, can apply. So for every move in the playbook, we're going to tell you the play and explain what it means. We're going to share a brand from our yearbook from 2023 that's currently running that play and really break down how they're doing it in a way that any brand can copy. So we're going to give you some entry points for that. And then we're going to talk through who is best positioned to be running that play right now, but isn't. So, Michelle, let's get into it. What is our first play?
Okay, so digging in, our first play is to think of yourself as an entertainment brand first.
What does that actually mean?
At the end of the day, whether you're a media company or a widget maker, you have a story to tell. And what we've seen work is brands who really pull through that storytelling and give that to people who are super creative, who can tell it on a global stage, i.e., at the box office or on Netflix, et cetera. But really like telling a big, bold, long format story is how we're seeing people break through.
What is the brand you think most embodies that idea of story in our yearbook?
So before I get into that, I do want to take a nod to the OG of this strategy, which I have to say is Lego, who completely turned their company around by using this exact strategy, taking a toy and turning it into a full film franchise. And then we just saw it again, of course, with Barbie. And something that I think is important to call out is for brands who aren't sitting on rich storytelling to begin with, we all have bought Barbies and played with Barbies, and we create these stories ourselves in our homes. And what Barbie did was give that same opportunity to someone like Greta Gerwig, who could take the story and show us what her version of her Barbie story is on the big screen. And so the brand that we picked from our yearbook, ironically, is not a media company and it's not a toy company. It's a gaming company and it's Nintendo. And what's so transformational about what they were able to do is they took this gaming company and transformed it into an entertainment multiverse.
It's interesting because when you look at that company from the outside, the characters do live in our lives, but they kind of become calcified. If you think of Mario, I haven't had a relationship with Mario, right? Like it's been a minute.
Who is Mario?
Yeah, who is Mario?
Yeah.
But they had to solve that and figure that out. So what exactly did they do to take the brand from gaming company to entertainment brand? And what is it that a brand could copy that doesn't have access to that IP?
I like to say that we have a parasocial relationship with Mario. We don't call it that. We've known him for multiple decades. He's been in our life, but he's never talked to us and we don't know him, to your point.
Right.
And so I think the first step of how they ran this play, so a person named Shigeru Miyamoto, which I'm sure I'm saying incorrectly, apologies. He was the actual original creator of Mario for the arcade game Donkey Kong in 1981. He was tasked with taking Mario and figuring out the right strategy to build it into a film. So they did have that inkling of an opportunity to see this as a way to grow. And what I found out in doing this diligence was it actually took 2 years of courting by Illumination, which is an incredible production company, the creator of Minions and Despicable Me franchise. For anybody who is going down this path, I do want to flag that it is not an overnight play. How do they run this play? What are the things that we can actually do as brands and operators to do something similar? So there's 3 aspects to it. The first is to bring the brand to life on social. Now, we did some work in looking at this originally, and Mario didn't have a big social presence, which kind of maybe it's shocking, maybe it wasn't, but it kind of was for me. And with the Illumination team at the helm, and mind you, that is a team that the year before had launched Minions Rise of Gru, which absolutely crushed on social. They were going to start with this playbook of starting on building a relationship on social. So they doubled down on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube. On TikTok alone, they took it from nothing to 1.3 million followers following Mario Brothers to movie, and ultimately grew the hashtag Mario Bros to over 10 billion views. So they really focused on their work on social. The second part of the playbook was in collaborations. So I think something that's interesting in this flywheel that they're building is you can't just build these plays on social and talk to your audience alone. You need to tap into other content and product areas to expand your surface area. So one of our favorite collaborations they did on the content side was in working with someone called Cole Bennett, who runs Lyrical Lemonade. He's like an extraordinary music producer, creates the coolest music videos. He's a production company. He now has a beverage. Like he's one of these people. He was tasked with creating a song and a video where they tap Jack Black, who's the voice of Bowser, which is a character in the film, to create this beautiful musical ode to Princess Peach. It went completely viral. So that, I think, incredible path to making noise, leveraging partners. On the consumer product side, this was one of those things that I'm such an enormous fan of and spend a lot of time doing, is finding the partners to bring physical products to life. They just partnered with so many people. Like you were in a Target, a Walmart, a grocery store, Truff sauce, like everybody was doing collaborations with them. It was awesome. In fact, Nintendo cited that they tripled their licensing royalties in 2023 because of all these deals. So incredible financial results.
So interesting. I just want to call that out because what you're really doing is putting yourself in the path of your consumer in every possible way. And I just don't think that we underestimate the degree to which that can be so impactful. And for a baby brand, maybe a brand that doesn't have that type of resource, it really is about thinking outside the box. Where is your customer and how can you get in front of them?
It's a total, rising tide lifts all boats. Of course, we all knew Mario, but it's not like they had a huge brand cloud on the consumer product side at that point. I think it was a really cool risk on both sides that paid off. The third bucket, which is candidly my favorite, was bringing the brand to life in real life. So we're all cooped up at home. We're scrolling on the internet. Here comes the announcement in February of 2023 that they are launching a Universal Studios Super Nintendo World. And the imagery, the content, the experience, it was so flawless. I ended up taking my family there last year. Highly recommend going. But they have everything. It's Mario Kart. It's moving piranhas. You can eat at the Toadstool Cafe. It takes you and puts you in the game. Like, it's so cool. And for those brands, of course, no, not all of us are going to be able to launch world building moments at amusement parks. However, what are those collabs and partnerships with anybody with real estate, really, that can benefit from that joint exposure? So,
and that it's IRL. Like, I think that that's what can be very impactful is that IRL in a strategic way. Of course, you have to be careful. It's like not everyone has the resources, but really figuring out how to show up. That's the lesson there.
I always say, even for retail strategy, it's like, think of it as a set for your consumers' lives. You're not walking into the Super Nintendo World and not sharing it on social media. I don't care who you are. Like, you are going to put a story of your family at that and find ways to do that in your own way. But fast forward, so that all of that hits by February, and then the film drops, and that's April 5th. The film reportedly cost $100 million to make, which, yes, of course, is an extraordinary investment. However, they achieved $1.3 billion in revenue just at box office alone. So amazing ROI. Granted, it did take 7 years to get there, so it's not a short-term fix, but it certainly was worth their weight in gold. The month after the film drops, they drop their Zelda game, their new Zelda game, which is called The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. They drop in May. It was the 10th most successful game on Switch ever. And we really believe that all the energy they built through the entertainment playbook got them there. Nobody was really talking about them in these new channels. And all of a sudden, you had everybody in the whole world talking about Mario. Zelda was a massive success after that. So I will say, one of the interesting things, as much as we're obsessed with this play, the company actually did not grow overall last year. And I did want to call that out. They declined by 21% due to softer sales, specifically because their core business, they are a gaming company, and they were sitting on now a 7-year-old Switch, which is like the core driver of their business. So what we did want to make sure that we highlighted was, what would have happened to Nintendo had they not done that last year? Like, you run an innovation-focused business, and that stuff takes time. However, you have to keep pushing and transforming yourself if you want to grow. And that's exactly what they did. And now anytime they drop a new game or whatever, a new piece of hardware, et cetera, we're going to expect an amazing spectacle and form of new entertainment because we now have a relationship with their brand in a totally different vertical and new space.
That's a fantastic call out. And I think it's like, we want to be as honest as possible, like what's working, what's not. I think it's important to look at this all holistically. But Michelle, I want to ask, what do you feel like about that playbook was so powerful in a nutshell as an attention driver? Because attention really is the focus here. So like, what was it that really was the most powerful element from that perspective?
So one of the things I think is so interesting about this play and grabbing attention was, we've all heard and known Mario for decades, but we only know him in a gaming capacity. Up until last year, we'd never seen him on social and on these other channels that we spend an unbelievable amount of time on. And so by breaking that kind of formula and popping him into these new places, for us, it was social, of course, on the big screen. You're seeing him all over stores and retail. You just can't not talk about it. Like, you can't, it's going to be top of mind for you. And I think that transformation accelerated that entire play for them.
I get that. I see that. So what other brands would you say are best positioned to be running that same play right now, but are not?
I would make the argument that everyone should become amazing world-class storytellers and try to figure out the entertainment game. However,
I will just jump in. It's kind of true. I mean, when you look at TikTok, which has become this primary entry point for really attention everywhere, you have to be showing up as an entertainment entity on that platform. You have to be entertaining. You have to be educating in an entertaining way. So it really is figuring out, how do I reorient myself with that?
That's right. So with that in mind, I mean, the number one brand for me that I will bang the table about over and over again is Duolingo. And I say that because we're long-term customers. My daughter is a massive fan. She has a relationship with Duo. I remember when we all were sitting watching Barbie and the little audio came on and the little feature in the film, everyone knew exactly what it was. So they have kind of the seeds already planted of taking Duo out of this edutech product, really.
Right.
And I'd love to see a Duoverse come to fruition. I think that they're super poised to do that. Other players that I'm excited about, and I would love to figure out how to encourage and inspire them to become entertainment brands. Number one would be Toca Boca. And I don't know if you're familiar with that business, but it is probably on the younger side, targeted to, I think pre-tween is probably their core customer. But it's a world building game. So it's the precursor to Roblox, if you will. And they have the coolest characters. I think they're owned by Spin Master. And just they could really crush it in that space and confident of it. And the second would be Squishmallow. Like Squishmallow has a cult following. And it's the same. We have a parasocial relationship with Squishmallow. They have a light social presence. But who are the Squishmallows? What are the personalities? Kids are obsessed with them and they collect them. Let's make them a form of entertainment. So those are my picks.
All right, so the next play is something we're calling reverse engineer participation. So what the heck does that mean? Well, we think about it as thinking about how your audience is going to participate in building your story and your product with you first and foremost, and then providing multiple entry points to make that possible and doing it over and over again.
Tell us, of all the brands we featured in the yearbook, who you think did that really well.
So we all know the numbers with Taylor. We called her in our yearbook most popular in the universe. Like she's highest grossing tour of all time in 2023, highest opening concert film of all time, responsible for NFL viewership spikes like none other among female audiences. We know all the superlatives. And technically, yes, she is a person and not a brand. But we kept her in here because last year she gave us a masterclass really in modern brand creation. And I know that we went back and forth on this, but it was a combination of business strategy, marketing, community building that any brand can really take lessons from. Yeah. So, so when we say reverse engineer participation, what exactly did she do? And I want to break it down to three things. So the first is that she positions herself as what I would call a fearlessly authentic and therefore deeply relatable character. And we've talked about characters before, characters as ways into story. But when we think about the foundation of Taylor's brand, we need to start with her songs because that's really the foundational material and really the way that they connect to the broader narrative of her life. There is a really sometimes painful vulnerability she brings to sharing her story that's kind of legendary at this point. Mm-hmm. And at the heart of that story is what I would call a character who's quirky at times, awkward at times super confident, can own an arena. She's both. And I think because she's both, she's deeply relatable.
Yes.
That's just a very relatable way to be. It's very authentic. So even though she's achieved like deity-esque status, her songs and by extension, her life become this big story in which fans can see different parts of themselves and their own struggles reflected. And so when you think of the best brands, they make you feel seen. Yeah. That's so me. That's so me. I feel that. That's so me. Oh my God. And you share it with friends. And, in this case, I think her growth through those various life stages and phases, and we've seen her come up, really becomes a reflection of her own fans' experience of the similar life stages. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Her authenticity is really the entry point. So I once heard Taylor Swift, being a Taylor Swift fan, this quote, being a Taylor Swift fan feels like traveling through multiple versions of your favorite character in real time, like reading a book as it happens live and growing with the protagonist. Like I love that because I think that's a perfect way to encapsulate. So that's number one in terms of how is she reverse engineering participation. Number two, she uses game mechanics to create entry points for fans to play, like quite literally play. You remember this year when she did that thing with the puzzles? We referenced it in the Brand Yearbook. Okay. So ahead of the launch of 1989, her version, Taylor's version, she did this brilliant partnership with Google, which required that fans come together to solve 33 million puzzles to unlock a virtual vault to reveal hidden track titles. So it was like this super fun, participatory, collaborative puzzle contest moment. And part of what it did was make the album the year's top selling album within 5 days of its release, meaning there was all this attention and, obsession generated around this because of this virtual participatory thing that it really helped buoy the release of the album.
Yes.
And so I just want to call that out because it really is integrating game mechanics into a whole strategy. And that's a way for fans to play. Another one she's really good at is dropping Easter eggs and cryptic clues. She plants these Easter eggs about what's coming next long before album releases. She's been doing this for years. You know, it could be dropping on social or dropping in live interviews or even through her outfits on red carpets.
Yes.
She does this, and the result is this constant drumbeat of conversation and attention. And so having those ways for fans to go, wait, is she or isn't she? And getting excited, that's all driven by these kind of classic game mechanics that we're seeing kind of drip out of gaming and really come to life. And then the third thing that I think she's really, really good at is creating opportunities for super fans to connect with one another. And so, I love this because, we think of this time, this moment that we're in, we are really devoid of shared cultural experiences. Like when I think back on 2023, like two big shared cultural experiences, maybe the Super Bowl and Taylor Swift shows. Like what else happened?
I don't know.
We're going to come up on another one, I guess, with the election, but you could argue that that's like everyone has their own little universe for that one.
Yes.
Loneliness, we know that's been called out by the Surgeon General, reached epidemic levels. We have this opportunity to have brands bring us together and create unifying moments and actual community. And Taylor's done an incredible job of that. And it's by bringing her fans in contact with one another. She does that in a million different ways, but a couple that I want to mention. Did you know she has these like secret listening parties where she brings together super fans to, actually have them to her house, secret sessions, I think they're called, where they actually come and pre-listen to albums. So that's one way. I know, but of course, if you're not one of those people, you can still get in on the action just by listening to her music or going to a concert. Being on social, that is the connection point. So she's really created that. I mean, when you think of the friendship bracelets, she didn't start that. That was fan-led.
So cool.
So it's like, hey, you're wearing a friendship bracelet. I'm wearing one. I get you. That's so me. And so she started it, but she didn't finish it. The fans finished it.
Yep.
And so that's what I think is so unique about her.
I mean, if you think about it at the macro level, music in general is probably the most powerful participation format there is because we can all sit in our car and sing to the song and participate without being professional artists, right? It's such a cool medium. I'm curious who, outside of Taylor, because of course she can do no wrong and is extraordinary, but when you look at sort of the larger landscape, who are you feeling like might be poised to run a similar play, maybe in the brand universe, that isn't right now?
Yeah. So if we're talking about reverse engineering participation, because that's this play, I think there's a few brands that are really poised to take that to the next level. The first is a little bit out of left field, but I want to call it out. And it's the brand Airstream. So Airstream trailers, we all know them. They have not gone anywhere. See them all over the roads. But I love a brand like that because there's this huge moment now with millennials and Zs not being able to afford houses. That is very well known. The cost of living is insane. And so we're seeing spikes in things like travel. I believe that we're about to see the same thing in things like nomadic living and the potential to create community and participation in a community with a brand like Airstream, to me, is next level. And so I actually think that we're poised to see that. And not just Airstream. I think Airbnb has done a really nice job of doing this as well. I think they're further along. But think about if Airstream created something where you could trick out your trailer, connect to others in your community, really creating a version of what Taylor has done, but using that ability to have lower cost, forge your own path living, I think is really compelling. Another set of brands I would say are financial services brands.
Oh my God.
Cash App has done a really good job of this, but if there's anything that we want to participate in, it's our financial future. I think as a society, we're ready to take control, and there's so much interest around that topic. And so a brand like Ally Bank or banking in general, financial products like Plaid, I see those as places that could potentially be entry points to a broader participation dynamic that they could roll out.
And I feel like when we all need that and we sit with so much shame in our lives because we don't, where do we go to participate in that without feeling stupid, publicly?
Yes. I follow so many financial creators and I feel like this is the moment, where is that big financial education brand? And certainly the banks are just not doing it, even though that's where we keep our money.
I know.
God,
the irony. Yes, I know that. I am number one fan of participation. And another interesting insight in this play, how much of TikTok's kind of rise in proliferating society, do you think that's made participation almost a necessity to grow? Like they kind of gave us all these amazing tools that like you can now shoot anything and participate and recut and duet, etc. How much of that business you think impacted now consumer expectations of being able to play?
I think there is a huge expectation around participation. It's a really good point. And perhaps we should have called this play the participation expectation, lean in. And I think that if you're not creating opportunities for participation, your audience definitely is like feeling a little left out to dry. And so it really has been. I think it's a really good point. And I do think it's like, what does that look like for your brand? Because it's not going to look the same for everybody.
I feel like I've always looked at sort of the millennial generation as the consumption generation because we grew up on Instagram and just consuming and scrolling. And when TikTok blew up with Z's, they're like, hey, I don't want to just consume. I want to create the content too. And so it is interesting. I would say probably all of our brands in the yearbook have levered this participation element because they know you want Z's, you got to let them in. Like you can't just talk to them, right?
Completely. Yeah, totally. All right, let's go on to the next one. Michelle, what's the next item in our playbook?
Okay, so the next play is to tap into nostalgia at all costs. What that means is take things from the past and modernize them to connect with the next generation. Why this is one of my favorites, if not the favorite book from the playbook, is that I do think we all have gone through this collective trauma, making it through COVID. And, you know, every time you go on social media, it feels like the world is imploding around you. And when you have these moments where people bring back things from a simpler time, it just brings you joy and it makes you feel good. And the businesses that do that successfully have been really cutting through the noise.
It's funny. I just want to call out simpler time because a lot of this nostalgia is for example, the year 2000.
Yes.
And it's a simpler time compared to where we are now.
It's like,
so let's just,
where was the flip phone? Whenever the flip phone existed, I feel like we hearken those days of yonder.
Exactly.
So I think probably across all the brands that we covered, lots of them use this as a piece of strategy. And I don't want you to get stressed or frustrated because you're not sitting on 50, 100 years of legacy. Anybody can align their brand to this, but we are going to call out the brand that probably did it the best this past year, which is McDonald's. And what they did to really hearken not just the nostalgia of their brand, but connect it to the next generation was three kind of sectors to this. And by the way, this really builds out the full IP flywheel that we use all day long. The first is let's double down on social. So McDonald's heavily invested in growing social and becoming way more relevant in social. And they did that by resurrecting their characters from the 80s. I don't know, Sarah, did you grow up with these characters?
I mean, Happy Meals. Yeah. It's funny because I have more of a connection with them now than I remember from then. Yeah. Like I don't remember Grimace, but it is important to say Grimace, who you're going to talk about in a moment, is from 1971. That is before my time. So
I didn't know that.
Not all of these characters from the 80s. That's what's so cool. A lot of them are from well before, and nobody who's interacting with them now has a relationship or even a memory.
That's right. I absolutely have old pictures of myself with Grimace from birthday parties, and I was not born in the 70s. So when they announced that they were bringing back these characters and then saying that they were going to commemorate his birthday with this new milkshake, it was such a moment for the brand. However, what worked wasn't necessarily them and their content. It was how the community and the amazing creative people of TikTok took that and ran with it. So the Grimace Shake, if you did not see this past year, essentially people would go buy the shake at McDonald's. They would say happy birthday to Grimace in the TikTok, and then something horrible and gruesome would happen after. And it was so unhinged and brilliant. The actual shake trend ended up resulting in 3.9 billion views for hashtag Grimace Shake. Like it worked, and it was so creative and incredible what people who absolutely did not grow up with Grimace did with the character. The total result in social in general got McDonald's to a 71 billion views on TikTok. So there was a major investment there. The main thing connecting back to nostalgia is don't be scared of your past. Like bring some of these things back up. I just think that there's fun stuff in the closet that people could play with, right? The second pillar in this is collab. So nostalgia and collabs is really interesting. And I do think if you're a business that doesn't have the legacy behind you, this is where you can play, because if it's not your brand, you can collab with one who has nostalgia. For McDonald's, they were doing a couple things that I think were really smart in this space. On the campaign side, they launched a campaign called As Featured In, which went back in time, and it was an edit of all the moments that McDonald's has showed up in film and television. And it really reaffirmed, like, hey, McDonald's has been part of culture forever. And it's a moment that they could just remind us, like, hey, we've been here and we've been showing up. And it was so well done. All of the clips were from nostalgia films, super smart. The next was in thinking about their collabs on the physical product side. And I think that this idea of going back in time, specifically for their last drop, which targets a segment called kidults. If you're not,
Wait, what is it?
kidults are kid-like adults, or I don't know, adults with kid inside of them.
I just want to make sure we make a point of this, because you had called this out in our research. I had never heard of kidults, and it is something like the fastest growing segment
in toys.
The market right now? Yeah, in toys. That's right, in toys. So that's another takeaway from this, where it's like, even if you're not explicitly in this category, this is an item that you can take away from the playbook and go, is there something in my brand that I can market to this segment?
That's right. And tapping into the collector really is what this is about. But when you look at how McDonald's did this, their last drop of the year was bringing back the McNugget Buddies, which I collected, ironically, as a kid, and now my daughter has them. And they tapped Kerwin Frost, who's an amazing artist, and he just gave them a modern, story and vibe and energy, and it was so well done. The third piece that I think was really, it was small but powerful, was when they dropped an 8-bit Grimace game. So they took like a Nintendo-like format, and it just felt so fun and fresh to play in the premium content bucket, like super smart. And all in all, McDonald's stock was up 30% from 2019. And something that I think is really miraculous about this is that, look, like over the past several years, the whole narrative has been around the goopification of the universe, like eating healthy and wellness, this and that. And here you have McDonald's, on a growth streak. And I think that the nostalgia element really helped them accelerate that.
That's very true. I love calling out the inherent contradictions of Gen Z audiences, because I think that it's easy to say Gen Z is all one thing, when in fact, Gen Z is human, and human beings have contradictions. And so I think it's important to call that out. I think that's a really great one. Who is best positioned, do you think, to be running this play, this tapping into nostalgia at all costs right now, but who isn't?
I think, again, lots of people can benefit from this. 3 that I specifically got excited about. The first was in the beauty space. And when you go back to that 2000s, maybe even earlier era, the brand that owned all of our hearts and minds is actually Clinique.
Yes. I feel like you just touched a part of my brain that I haven't actually thought about, even though they're still alive right now and doing fine.
But they haven't had their rebirth or their moment. We've all been reading these headlines. Tweens and teens, et cetera, are taking over Sephora. People are upset about it. But we've always done that. Like, girls have always experimented with beauty. And Clinique actually owned that narrative back then. Their ad campaigns, like I remember just idolizing, like, what was it? Christy Turlington and that sort of era of model, and they just haven't done it, but I think they're so ripe to just resurrect that energy. The second is in consumer tech. When I think back to joy and moments of joy on the internet, I think of AOL and Yahoo, and I think about the aesthetic and that sort of early era internet aesthetic, the quote unquote simpler times, and just how much fun those brands could have taking on that nostalgia and, again, modernizing it for the next generation. And then the third one that maybe is a little controversial, but I am very passionate about, is actually Disney. They've been so focused on dropping new IP and new content that I think they almost missed and have a huge opportunity to really lean into that nostalgia. Like, what was Mickey and Minnie and Disney for all of us in the 2000s? What did that represent? And how can they modernize that today instead of adding newness to the business?
They are coming out with Bambi, so that'll satisfy us a little bit.
Okay, Sarah, bring us home. What's our final play?
All right. So our last play, create a real relationship with your audience.
That sounds amazing. What is that?
So the primary way that people are connecting to each other and to the things they love today is through other people. The entire media ecosystem is oriented towards people-to-people connections. We talk about this all the time, whether it's a TikTok video or a YouTube clip or a podcast. A person is more often than not the pathway for us to discover a new idea, a new product, a new service, like a new anything.
Yeah.
So when you think about connecting to a person, what is it that you're doing? You're actually creating a relationship with that person.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you don't know them, even if you've never met them, it's intimate. And I think it's important for brands to know that whether or not you're a person or a brand, that's the environment you're competing in. That's the environment you're showing up in. So your goal as a brand needs to be less about overtly selling than it is about creating that relationship. One that's, I would argue, as close to a real relationship as possible. You can take cues from real relationships.
I love that.
So let's look at a brand from our yearbook that is doing it really well and unpack what that looks like. So the brand we picked, Alex Cooper's Unwell Networks. We called Unwell most likely to build the next Harpo production for 20-somethings. TLDR, this is a production company co-founded by Alex Cooper, the podcast host who famously snagged that $60 million deal with Spotify, you probably heard about, for her insanely popular show, Call Her Daddy. Unwell produces content for Gen Z women, really, which for now means podcasts and films, but it also cultivates stars. And I think it's important to put a pin in that, remember that, because we're going to come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
For now, Unwell is just producing their projects, but eventually it's going to build 360 brands around them. So think consumer products and the like.
Yeah.
They debuted with podcasts from Alex Earl, who is a massive TikTok superstar, as well as Madeline Argy, another one. Those are the first two personalities it signed, and it's going to keep upping its roster. Essentially what it means, and for our purposes, is that it is packaging up premium content with audience. They're building an audience via social, so via the talent's own channels, but then their own. And they have IRL events like screenings and, of course, media like podcasts. That's really different than a traditional production company, which is usually just about producing content, selling it to networks, and hoping against hope that it's successful. So the way Unwell is building audience is really through personalities on their roster. It started with Alex, but it's really expanding to other personalities. So these personalities have existing fan bases. People are the way in. They're the way people discover. They're sort of that pathway to discovery. And the way those fan bases come to life is really quite something. Actually, in that New York Times piece, it described Alex's tour, which is kind of like part bachelorette party, part rave, part comedy show. Like her fans are diehard and they're there for her and they're there to party with her. And now that she's getting married, they're on that journey too, maybe growing up while she's using this new talent to cultivate a younger fan base.
So here's the thing now where I want to kind of be that voice in the room. But most brands are logos. They're not Alex Cooper. They're not a person. So how on earth can a brand do something like this?
I think your question is great. How do you build a relationship with a logo? Well, let's go back to the core tenet of what does it take to build an authentic relationship? Trust, intimacy, transparency, consistency, just to name a few. So you can actually build these with an audience, and you can do it by doing something that I call building a digital campfire. So I've obviously talked about this before. It's something I'm mildly obsessed with. But essentially, a campfire is a tool for creating an authentic relationship between you and your ideal audience. And I'll break it down. There's 3 parts. So I'll dive into those, and then you could pepper me with questions because I know this one can be a little challenging to get your head around.
Mm-hmm.
So the first is you got to nail your story. Story has been a big theme throughout this conversation. And I realize that's because you really do need to figure out what you're about, what bigger belief, what bigger idea, what bigger POV on the world that you really stand for. And I think that's because people buy stories.
Yeah.
People don't just buy products, they buy stories. Like even at Nike, when you were there, the concept of just do it, that's applying a story to what is essentially a shoe. It's a shoe or it's a shirt. It's just a product, but the story is what you're buying, your ability to connect to that and say, hell yeah, like I can just do it. Or Alex Cooper, I think you could argue that this idea of sort of sexual empowerment as a pathway to life empowerment, to living your best Oprah type life, that's her POV on the world. And that's a POV that her fans buy into.
Yeah.
Like I can own my sexuality, I can show up in the world. And that's a really powerful point of view to connect around.
Yes.
So that's number one, is like nailing your story. The second thing that I think Alex and Unwell in general is doing really well is the second aspect of building a digital campfire is being really clear on who they're for, who their people are. I would say it's find your people. So it's like they found their people who are going to care deeply about that story, with whom it's going to resonate. So for Alex, it started with a certain type of millennial woman, and now it's a certain type of Gen Z woman with whom that story resonates, that message. So focusing obsessively on that core audience, really getting crystal clear on who they're for, and then focusing obsessively on them. And then the third kind of like ingredient in your digital campfire is speaking that audience's language. So figuring out how they speak, what they're saying, what they care about. In that New York Times piece, there was a fabulous quote, and it was kind of hidden, but it said, Ms. Cooper spends time studying Gen Z content down to their edits and angles. Like, that is exactly what I mean. Understanding what the language is of the audience you speak.
Yes.
It can also mean showing up in the places that they are, which more and more are really private, closed, intimate spaces like DMs, or experiential places like games, like Roblox. So these are what I call digital campfire platforms. And then you got to do it consistently again and again and again. So those are those three elements of a digital campfire that, if you can do them together, any brand, you really can create this effect of having a real one-on-one human-like relationship with your audience, even if you're not human.
Yeah.
Even if you're not human.
You're re-inspiring me on this space, because I do think even the simple act of changing the way brands communicate with their consumers in one-to-one and one-to-many, that in and of itself can be a big step change for businesses. People are scared to step outside of the logo and humanize.
So who are the brands that are really well positioned to be running the same play but aren't yet? I think a lot about this. I think any brand connected to core celebrations, core holidays like birthdays, for example. We hear so much about holidays like, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, but birthdays are actually the thing that we all celebrate all the time. And if you notice, they become opportunities in the culture to celebrate each other and celebrate friendship, especially in a moment when many of us are still single. When I was single, birthdays were like a major thing, traveling around the world for them, especially big milestone birthdays. What brands are owning that? And I always ask myself the question, like, a Hallmark Media, an American Greetings, a 1-800-Flowers. These are the companies that should be owning birthdays. And why I say that and where it connects to this sort of core tenet about creating a real relationship is because birthdays are a mechanism around which we're already creating and having real relationships with each other. So why not ride that wave as a brand and get on that train and sort of like be a part of something that already exists? Anyone who touches birthdays, I think, is like a massive opportunity that's really waiting to explode. And I think something that has to be said here is that if you create that real relationship, if you're a brand, you actually do that, you're occupying real estate in your audience's lives that's wholly unique. Like you're not even competing with other brands. You cease to become a brand. You become a friend, on par with a friend. And so you're really living in someone's life in a unique way, an ever-evolving way, but you have to earn that. So it doesn't come overnight.
Totally. One of the things that you just kind of sparked in me, I remember doing a ton of work around this relationship space in my past role at Nike. And one of the things that always stood out to me was Starbucks' initial move when they were redesigning the coffee experience to ask you your name and write it on the cup. Like that little tiny step. It just
very simple.
And you start to actually build a relationship with those people, and to the point where they miss you when you don't show up, and they know your order, and there's a rapport, and it's fun. That there's lots of ways brands can do it without the person.
Such a great example. Thank you for calling that out. Yes.
Like it just
completely.
And it's magical when people do it well. It is magical.
It really can be. Yeah, it really can be. Like, no joke. Magic is a great word for it because it can touch people's lives in a really magical way that takes them to a place that you really didn't think was possible. All right, Michelle, we're going to wind things down.
All right, so we've covered a lot today. And if it isn't clear already, we eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff.
Yes. And like it or not, we've only just barely scratched the surface, which is why we're announcing that we're taking this on the road. We're going to be bringing the full playbook directly to brands to help you learn how to capture and commercialize 21st century gold attention.
which is, let's be honest, the most exciting part for both of us, because we'll be able to bring this playbook to life for you and your brand. And if you'd love to learn more about this, please shoot us an email at editors@thebrandyearbook.com, which we'll include in the notes.
Or check out the Brand Yearbook at thebrandyearbook.com, where you can download 2022 and 2023's editions of the yearbook. I'm Sarah Wilson.
And I'm Michelle Goad.
And we'll see you out on the field.